Last season in the playoffs, the Empire convincingly took down the Carolina Flyers and the Chicago Union on their way to their second AUDL championship and an undefeated season to boot. Unlike the regular season when Ryan Osgar, to me, rightly took home the MVP, playoff Jack was in full effect as he took home the MVP championship weekend honors. But it wasn't like Osgar just handed the baton off to Jack and said, "Here you go, now it's your turn." Some credit should be given to the opposition for game planning and figuring out how they could best limit Ryan Osgar, a conversation that we're going to get into now. So starting with that game that decided who would go to championship weekend, the DC Breeze should be credited for throwing something at Ryan Osgar that he hadn't truly seen much that season, forcing him to do something totally different. The decision with their scheme to make Osgar beat them with his legs and not his throws would seem like it paid off, as he had a season-low single assist and a season-high 4 throwaways. However, he did score a team-high 5 goals, helping to beat the DC Breeze with those legs as a downfield target. Yet, for the only time all season, it seemed like a team had figured out the thermal exhaust port to the Death Star that was the New York Empire offense. And I have to be honest here, I've been too busy figuring out and going through this preseason stuff for the AUDL season that I did have to look up what the actual weakness was to the Death Star, but you get the point. So anyway, with the weakness now known, the Flyers and the Union did try a similar thing. But with additional practices and time to work on the schemes that he might see, Osgar and the O-line for the Empire had already adapted by championship weekend, setting the AUDL record, that being Osgar, for most goals scored in a single playoff season. 17 total goals to the playoffs, 5 against DC, 7 against the Flyers, and 5 against Chicago. And by the way, he also owns the record for most assists in a single postseason, throwing 18 in 2021, before Jack tied that record in 2022, but that's a topic for another time. Because you keep hearing me say that Osgar adapted, that Osgar figured it out. But if you ask him, his first response is always to praise his teammates and give them the credit they deserve. There is no Osgar without Jack, or Babbitt, or Elliott and Saul, or John Lithio and Charles Weinberg, who I'd like to package together and call and highlight as an Osgar Plan B. Against DC, Lithio had 3 assists and no goals. Weinberg, 1 assist and 3 goals. Against the Flyers, Lithio had 4 goals and 1 assist, while Weinberg had a goal and 2 assists. Then in the final, Lithio poured in 5 goals and an assist, while Charles matched Jack's 5 assists in that game with 5 of his own in 6 less points. Those numbers don't sound gaudy. Neither their throwing nor receiving totals from any of those 3 games feel like outrageous outliers. But this is where the stats separate from the eye test. If Osgar isn't finding space underneath to initiate, that must mean that there's space for someone else to do so. Oftentimes, it was Jack coming from the handler space or Babbitt coming in for a quick reset. But a ton of the cuts in that middle part of the field came from Weinberg and Lithio, 2 very different players who connected the offensive juggernaut together. Weinberg is one of the more underrated players in the entire league, with some injuries last season limiting his season totals and keeping him out of the public eye. Lithio is a 6'5" iron giant whose continually improving throws could be just as key to the 2023 Empire as his constant presence in the end zone. For context, Lithio has 90 goals in 2 seasons, already putting him 8th on the all-time Empire list, and at this pace he would be up to 4th by next season, just behind Cat Stevens, Ben Yott, and Jeff Babbitt, who will all be looking to keep their distance atop the leaderboard. The fact that Lithio and Weinberg do their work in the flow of the offense, that allows New York to keep their offensive identity regardless of the game plan against Osgar. And as someone who does love the sport of Ultimate, I do like the fact that other teams are pushing the New York Empire to their absolute limits. I think there's a part of them that also wants that. And while it will end in disappointment for one of the two not going to championship weekend, having this strategic rivalry as much as the actual sweat and tear rivalry that is the New York Empire and the DC Breeze, I think the fact that X and O's wise, those coaches and players are also pushing themselves to the extremes is also not a bad thing for Ultimate. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you check out the video from yesterday and keep tuning in all week long. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we've got different content coming out to prepare you for what is 7 p.m. New Rochelle against the Philadelphia Phoenix on Saturday night. That's the home opener for the New York Empire as they look to kick off their big championship defense. So, as I always say, we'll see you there.